India can't walk away from the Chinese investment capability and the Chinese penetration of the Indian market. Those are
Right.
important things. The other thing is, if you want to be Trump's ally, you have to start doing things which you won't like doing. You'll have to take an overt military posture towards China.
For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
You're watching The Gist on Stat News Global. I'm Ramananda Sengupta. Our very special guest today, who's probably familiar to our regular viewers, is Professor Amit Gupta, Senior Advisor to the Forum of Federations. But there's a lot more to him than just that, but you'll see about that in the bio below. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
It's as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you, Ramananda.
Yes. So, today we're going to be talking about, very obviously, the Trump victory and what it means for South Asia in general, India in particular, and perhaps look at some of the friction points that would exist between Trump and India. So, to begin with, the mood in India seems to be rather positive. That we know how to deal with Trump. We've dealt with him before. And would you agree with that? Do you think that's the right assessment to have?
You know that I'm a pessimist on this one. And my view is, yeah, you know how to deal with Trump, but where does Trump put you in his hierarchy of foreign policy issues? And to
Mm-hmm.
my mind, India doesn't come in high. India comes in the middle or lower middle in terms of his priorities. And I think his two drivers right now are one, he wants to make Europe pay more for NATO. He wants to diffuse the alliance. He wants to resolve Russia and Ukraine. So I think that part is there. And depending on who he picks on his foreign policy team, most of them say Europe is a dead issue. We don't have interest there. Our real push should be towards containing China or confronting China.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the energy will go. And again, there's a range of opinions out there about what he should do. And these go from as far as solidifying the commitment to Taiwan, to not solidifying the commitment to Taiwan, to using nuclear weapons in Asia, which would be the
Mm-hmm.
second time they were used in Asia. So
Mm-hmm.
that's, I think, tier one. Tier 1A is Israel and the Middle East, because Israel is America's great strategic partner, and you can't really change that. Below that comes India. And yes, you know how to deal with him, but the first time round, what did you do that was so exceptional?
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
what I mean by that is, if you look at what India-US relations got caught up in, Ramananda, Harley Davidsons and the import duty on them.
Right.
You drive around Delhi, I drive around Delhi. I never see a Harley Davidson. So why was
Right.
this an issue? Right. In India, most people buy Japanese motorcycles or now electric scooters. So why was this even an issue? But it's these kinds of small, petty things that become subjects of debate between India and the United States. And I'll just say
Mm-hmm.
one last thing here. In the big areas, technology transfers, access of Indians to the US labor market, that's where I think the conflicts or the clash of interests will come between India and the United States.
So, the thing is that if we were to look at Project 2025, that document, which is supposed to be the sort of conservative manifesto, for want of a better word, There it is very clearly said that China is our main focus, and we shouldn't let anything else detract from that. And because of that, the Indians believe that if China is the main focus, that aligns with our outlook as well. Number one, and number two, that because of that, we are bound to sort of get some spin-off in terms of more technology, more defense, strategic relations, more things because of the Quad and other things. And that's one area where they're hoping that they will develop. Of course, the issues of tariffs and all will be there, and that's the part that Indians feel that they know how to deal with. But would the earlier assumption be right that just because the two sides are against, sort of not against, but aligned against China, that India will benefit from that? Oh, and the second, sorry, I'll interrupt you again. The second is that because of Trump's sort of plans to tax China, as it were, out of existence, um, that the China plus one and some other investors who are now in China might want to come to India. That seems to be the thinking here.
Uh, okay, I'll just take it one by one. Just because Trump wants to be more aggressive towards China, it
Hmm.
doesn't mean automatically that he's going to be nicer to India. He's talked about India amongst other countries uh, imposing higher tariffs, cheating on different foreign
Right.
trade issues, so on. So I'm not sure where the friendship is there. The
Hmm.
friendship, at the end of the day, the US has two strategic partners, Britain and Israel. And Trump is on the outs with Britain. So that only leaves Israel. Everybody else is one tier to two tiers to three tiers below that. And I'll leave
Hmm.
it to the people in New Delhi to figure out which tier they're in. I don't think that happens automatically. Second, everybody keeps talking China plus one, but go read the Economic Survey of India, which was written, I think, at the behest of the Indian Prime Minister. The finance minister doesn't have that kind of authority. And in it, they say, yes, China plus one, but we must also seek Chinese FDI. And you probably noticed this in Delhi. I was in Delhi last week. The number of Chinese companies that have suddenly started advertising on Indian television, Hisense, Huawei, and all this, what is going on? So I think India can't walk away from the Chinese investment capability and the Chinese penetration of the Indian market. Those are
Right.
important things. The other thing is, if you want to be Trump's ally, you have to start doing things which you won't like doing. You'll have to take an overt military posture towards China. And after just disengaging along the border, you're not going to go back and say, now that we've disengaged, we're re engaging. It's
Right.
incredible.
Hmm. So, and what about the other issues like tariffs and things which India feels that they've learned how to deal with?
Good luck.
Okay. The other thing that I mean, in fact, I was recently looking through that manifesto. It's a huge tome. It's some 922 pages or something.
Oh, God, yes.
Um, while it says that the focus is purely on China and that we mustn't let anything else sort of divert our attention from that, it is also very clear that it says that our disengagement, I mean the US disengagement from China cannot be just an abrupt thing that we just cut off all relations,
Right,
because there's still a huge amount of things which the US can't do without.
right.
Pharma and some um what was the phrase they used? Film for solar energy and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I don't know how is that disengagement going to be done if you're going to do it bit by bit by bit. You think the Chinese will just sit by and let you do that?
No, the Chinese are very good at playing this game. They've been playing this game with the Americans since the time of George Bush Jr. And
Hmm.
so that's 25 years of playing the game. And they
Right.
will make some concessions because that always makes sense. But at the
Hmm.
same time, they're going to turn around and look at Trump and say, you do realize that the Walmarts and the Costco's and the Targets in America are able to provide goods that are cheap to the American consumer because of China. Uh,
Right.
the main reason Biden lost the election was high inflation. And high inflation hit all of us in our pocketbooks, from food to
Hmm.
the household items we were buying at big box stores like Walmart and so on. If he needs to reduce inflation, he's going to have to work out something with the Chinese. This idea of a 60% tariff, that's great on the election stump, but it makes no sense in real terms because it's the poor people, it's the middle class which buys Chinese products. For
Hmm.
the rich, it doesn't matter. Firstly, price tags don't matter, and what they buy is more European and so on, or North American. But for those people who are working class, this would be a huge hit. So disengagement is not that easy. And they've tried China plus one. The Chinese outsmarted them. They moved their factories to Vietnam, did 49% uh, content in China, the other 51% in Vietnam, and 100% of the profits to China.
Right.
So I'm not sure where this game goes. And there's another thing, Ramanand, that you've seen the US as well as anybody else has. Where is this ability to make manufacturing capacity?
Hmm.
It's just not there. And to
Yeah.
rebuild manufacturing capacity to make, like, let's say, a sweater, it's going to take you 5 to 10 years. By then, Trump is long gone.
True. True. That is the point. Look, I mean, another interesting thing I was just noticing the other day. Um, Professor Vivek Wadhwa, I mean, you must have heard of him. He
Yeah,
has a very interesting article where he talks about, you know, how he decided to go Republican simply because Trump is talking about real issues and the Democrats were not. You know, like things that actually impact people, as in, immigration, high prices, inflation, things like that. Whereas the Democrats were talking about it at some higher philosophical level or something like that. Is that a correct assessment to make? Do you think people have actually voted for Trump because of that?
absolutely. There's two. Firstly, look at it this way. George Orwell, who was the master of political communication,
Hmm.
always said, keep the message simple. You remember Animal Farm? Four legs good,
Yes.
two legs bad. Everybody understands that. Make America great again. What it means, nobody knows, but everybody likes it. It's a simple message. And I should remind you, because I gave this talk yesterday to a European audience who have no idea. They're snickering at Trump. And I said, don't snicker at Trump because he can hurt you. The other thing is, if he pulls the plug on Ukraine, you don't have the ability to continue this. So you're going to go from four legs good, two legs bad to four legs good, two legs better. Remember when the pigs get bourgeois in Animal
Hmm.
Farm, the sheep start shouting a new chant, and the Europeans are the sheep on this one.
Right.
So my own sense is yes, he kept the message simple. You're unhappy, I'll make you happy. Inflation was a real problem, and Biden didn't get it, Harris didn't get it. Immigration is a problem, mainly because Biden tried to do a more humane immigration policy that led to large numbers of people at the border. The Republicans didn't like Ukraine, the Democrats didn't like Gaza, and they all blamed Biden. And
Hmm.
lastly, this is something no American likes to talk. And by American, I mean white American. There is a very high level of misogyny in American politics. American women are held to far higher standards in the political spectrum than men are. Uh, uh, All that discussion of Kamala Harris's laugh. How many people do you know, Ramananda, who have a pleasant laugh?
True.
Not too
True.
many, right? But
I
yeah, do
can't
we
think of any,
hold?
in fact.
I can't think of any either. We tend to laugh rather poorly. But my point is, name one other politician on the planet, male, whose laugh has been criticized, or the way they look has been criticized, or the fact that
Hmm.
they don't have children. The Prime Minister of India doesn't have children. I've never heard anybody say he doesn't have children, therefore he's a lesser human being. But
Hmm.
with Kamala Harris, the fact that she hadn't done any breeding, to put this as crudely as I can, was held against her. The childless cat lady. This at so many levels, that's an insult. So
Hmm.
he was smart. He talked to the American people, and Biden could have done corrective measures in 2023. He didn't. This is what cost him.
So, I was also something that has been intrigued me even earlier in the 2020 elections, even though Trump lost. According to a Pew report, 40% of married women who voted apparently voted for him. And that is despite the Republican position and Trump's personal reputation as a, uh, sort of a womanizer, for want of a better word. But
Yeah,
um, and but what is it? Given that the Republican Party is pro-abortion, I mean, anti-abortion and things like that, doesn't that impact? I mean, women, I would have thought would have been a bit more concerned about that.
there's two political scientists in California at UCLA and Southern California, Jane June and Natalie Masuoka, and they've looked at every presidential election since 1948. And they said, with the exception of two presidential elections, Barry Goldwater and Lyndon Johnson, Bill Clinton and Bob Dole, in every election, white women in a majority have voted for the Republicans. And they
Oh,
voted for the, yes. Um,
hmm.
in 2016, he got 52% of the white woman vote. 2020, he got 55%. This year, he dropped to 53%. But the majority is there. And the dissonance between this is our stated position, abortion, Trump is a boor, me too, and all this. And then when you go into the voting booth, you listen to your husband, your father, your boyfriend, your crazy uncle Mark, who you wouldn't leave alone in the same room with the family dog. These are the people that determine your vote. And again, Ramananda, contrast this with India.
Yes.
Okay, can you tell your wife who to vote for in the elections? The answer is no. Right? I
Hmm.
can't tell my mother who to vote for in the Indian election. She
Right.
decides on her own.
Hmm.
This is the reality about America. And all these people who talk American democracy do not want to address these issues because it's putting up a mirror in front of you and you're not going to like what you see. Why is it 53% of white women? See, the majority of non white women, Hispanics, Asians, and Black, voted for Kamala Harris. They have been consistently liberal. This is, it's the majority of white women who voted with their husband's checkbook in mind. So Trump was able to get the vote. And they
Ah.
also saw inflation. Mm.
Hmm. So, I mean,
Sorry,
I was rather simplistic assessment. I think that I was trying to come at was that perhaps is that Bible Belt thing that uh, the rednecks sort of tell their women this is how you want to vote, kind of a thing.
no,
That's not how
it's
it is.
look, he won Pennsylvania, he won Arizona, he won Nevada, he won Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a
True.
state with a
True.
huge university system. So what went
Mhm.
on there? And every, as you know, I wrote an article in the Times of India on November 5th.
Yes, I
I
was
said,
about to come to that. It's a brilliant
yeah,
article because you called it exactly the way it was.
I said Trump would win, forget the polls. And every American political scientist is, Kamala Harris has a slight edge in the polls. And I'm like,
Right.
listen, buddy, I just saw the Indian elections in June, and we found out what a fiasco the exit polls were. Remember, the exit
Absolutely.
polls were saying 350 to 400.
Hmm.
It was what, 240 was
Right.
the eventual outcome. So if you believe this stuff and you believe their methodology, which is lousy, um, you can be delusional. The Trump people knew. The Trump people were going from district to district. They were seeing the yard signs, Trump vans. They were seeing the crowds which are coming. He got a jam packed sellout crowd in Madison Square Garden in New York. The only people who sell out Madison Square Garden are Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. Okay. You
Hmm.
have to be a boxer or somebody of that caliber. Or I assume Taylor Swift can sell it out. But he touched the right, correct chords. He went after the issues that mattered. And as you say, he didn't get into these what is democracy ones. Seriously, in any country in the world, no politician cares if you call them undemocratic because nine-tenths of the population doesn't understand what that means. But if you say, oh, politician X gave his brother in law a contract to supply food to the state government. Now, all of a sudden, that's personal corruption, which we all understand. And Trump was
Absolutely.
much better at doing that because who understands democracy? Who's read Plato in America? Who's read John Locke? I have,
Mhm.
but I'm the 0.001%. And my vote doesn't
Right.
count in that sense. Other people were
Mhm.
looking at why am I poorer now than I was 4 years ago?
Mhm. It's interesting, we were talking about China. I mean, one of the points of alignment, as it were, from the Indian perspective. But apparently, it's not just China. If you look at again, coming back to that Project 2025, that manifesto, they say that with Pakistan, it cannot be business as usual. Afghanistan, we've had a problem, terrorism and all that stuff. We must review our terrorism policy vis-a-vis these two countries. And then on Diwali, Trump went on air to say that, I'm going to fight for Hindus in Bangladesh, which sort of had all the people here saying, wow, here's one world leader who's finally talking about that. Nobody else seems to be bothered. But how far is that actually true, or is it just political sort of, commentary?
I think it's political commentary. I
Mm-hmm.
really want to see what he can do about Hindus in Bangladesh. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what practical policy measure is he going to take on Hindus in Bangladesh? And
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of anything. Trade sanctions on Bangladeshi textiles. The Bangladeshi economy is already in a mess. You can't do
Right.
anything to make it better. So I think that, but it's good rhetoric. Look, again, in my article, I pointed out the business community, the Indian business community likes Trump because of the fact that he's going to make it lower taxes, lower regulations. The Hindu element in the Indian American community likes the Hindu part in it, and the Hindu part for him is Tulsi Gabbard. Always remember this: Kamala Harris walked this very fine line. My mother, the Tamil Brahmin, though never called herself Indian or Hindu. Tulsi Gabbard is a practicing Hindu who actually quotes from the Bhagavad Gita. So, if
Mm-hmm.
you are a religious Indian, who do you identify with? Sort of this mixed message, Kamala Harris or the true believer? But on the immigration thing, because you were talking about irritants, and I'm sorry, I forgot that. Irritant number one is going to be tariffs, giving Trump what he wants. And the Indian government better start talking about that. Because the first time around, I'm still not sure what they did, which they're so proud of. Okay.
Right.
Second thing is, Trump has made it very clear, and believe everything he says because he will do it. This idea that it's rhetoric is stupid. He said very clearly, illegal immigration, I'm going to stop. I'm also going to close the pathways to legal immigration and the loopholes. So these things like H-1B, genius visas, he's going to start going after that. And once you narrow that path, there's a lot of Indians who'll be affected in that.
A lot of Indians. It's not just the IT people, it's textiles, it's
No,
pharma, it's a lot of other businesses will get
right.
hurt.
Lots of
Mhm.
businesses will get hurt. And see, he's very clear. He says Americans can do these jobs, which they can. Those
Mhm.
days are gone when you needed to get Indian IT people to come and punch code, because since Bill Gates did that in the late 1990s, uh, children in America start their schools, kindergarten, with a computer on their desk. So everybody knows how to do this one way or the other. And if nothing else, they know how to make computer games. So do you really need H-1Bs in that sense? I think that will be the big issue. And then the other part is India has India's in the BRICS. And the BRICS means Russia and China. And India's in a hard place, Ramananda.
Mhm.
Because if you listen to Trump and get out of BRICS, you've now allowed a Russia China alliance to come about. which is not in India's long term interest.
Absolutely
And
not.
right, absolutely not. So you have to stay in BRICS and you have to play a guiding role in BRICS. Uh, Iran is in BRICS. We all know Trump really
True.
doesn't like Iran. What are you going to do? So that part is there. Or are you actually going to militarize and say, yeah, Trump, if you decide to do Taiwan, we'll send the INS Vikramaditya there. And
Hmm.
whatever brave talk may be going on in New Delhi in political and military circles, I can bet you 1,000 rupees when push comes to shove, they won't do that. They will sit and engage in studious inaction and
Hmm.
say, they make the kind of statement the Australians and the Japanese make. Do you know what the Australians said after Galwan happened? And this is something you should tell the policy circle people in Delhi. They didn't say the Chinese were to blame. They said, we view this issue with grave concern. What the hell does that mean? And the Japanese, the other people who we love so dearly in New Delhi, said exactly the same thing.
Hmm.
Nobody said China took Indian territory because,
Right.
right. And
Yeah, I
also,
accept.
yeah.
Yes.
And again, to this little lobby which thinks that they've got a new bosom buddy, what they need to remember is when Mumbai terror attacks happened, India was told to exercise restraint.
Hmm.
Did Biden tell Netanyahu to exercise restraint? Is Trump going to tell Netanyahu to exercise restraint? The day you reach that situation where they start telling you, yeah, go and kill as many Pakistanis as you like, then they're your friends. Until then, it's a transactional relationship. And on Pakistan, I'll say this. When Trump came in the first time, he declared Pakistan a terrorist state for 6 months. Then it went back to business as usual. I
Hmm.
really want to see what they can do. And Afghanistan, poor, backward country in the Stone Age, you can't sanction it. Your military doesn't want to go back in there and fight because they learned their lesson the
Right.
first time. What are you going to say? And Afghans are not trying to knock down the door to go and study at Harvard. The
Hmm.
Afghans who want to do that are already living in New Delhi in Defense Colony or Lajpat Nagar.
So, I mean, from what I'm hearing from you, the strategic ties that we already have vis-a-vis, the EU, is that going to take a hit, or is that going to sort of get better slightly at least?
It depends on how India plays the game. And
Hmm.
this is where these people who claim they understand Trump, and again, I would ask these people, why did Trump twice say, yes, I'll come for Republic Day, and twice turned you down? If you knew him so well, you should have known on day one that he wasn't serious,
Right. Of
right?
course.
President Lula of Brazil, when he was asked, will you come to India? Oh, absolutely. And he brought 300 businessmen with him because he thought that Brazil and India could do business. Okay. Um, to me, you have to sit and I look at it this way. There are seven Trumps. Okay. Yeah. There are seven
Hmm.
Trumps who you can do business with. Trump, his wife, his daughter, her husband, Don Jr., Don Jr.'s girlfriend, Eric's wife. Sorry, I'm up to eight already. And then there's Tiffany Trump, though Trump doesn't like her. He says she's fat. I mean, who calls their own child this? Only Trump. But each of these people has global business interests. You can tie into them. The Kushners do real estate. Ivanka Trump has all kinds of clothing and beauty products. You tie
Hmm.
into this, and for let me put it this way, you can't buy the loyalty of the United States, but you can rent it for 6 months. So you better decide and decide what matters to you. Is it the immigration of people? And again, in New Delhi, they get this completely wrong. I live in Alabama, which is the second poorest state in America. The poorest is Mississippi. So the catchphrase in Alabama is "Thank you for Mississippi," because it makes us look better. But do you know what we've done in the last 5 years? No, you should laugh. We all laugh at it because we have a sense of humor. But in the last 5 years, the state of Alabama has been bringing in Malayali nurses to work in our healthcare system because we have a shortage. Uh, the state of Alabama in October sent a delegation to India to try and get high school science teachers. And the idea was bring them to Alabama, make them take a master's in education in Alabama, and then put them into the Alabama school system. Now,
Brief. Okay.
why am I saying this? Again, the policy people are all, will my child go and study in Harvard? Will I get a job in an NGO or in the UN or the United States Institute of Peace? That's the Foreign Service. But real Indians are sought after, and that will not be impacted by the deficiencies of Indian foreign policy or the lack of interest in American foreign policy. Tell me, I'm sure when this goes online, Indians will sit and say, I didn't know that Alabama wants school teachers. Where do I apply? Okay.
I'm
And
sure that's going to happen. Yes.
that's going to happen. And Alabama wants nurses. And if we want it at number 49, Mississippi, which is next door, is going to be asking for them next. And if we bring in 4,000 school teachers from India every year, and more states start doing this, who cares about the H-1B? Who cares about the fact that the foreign secretary's daughter didn't get into Harvard? Real Indians who send
Hmm.
money home to their families are going to be employed in the United States of America, regardless of what happens. And
Hmm.
yes, you'll get slapped with tariffs. But I'll go back to Harley Davidson. Do you know how many Harley Davidsons were being sold in India? I heard it was somewhere between 10,000 to 50,000, which is
I've heard
nothing.
less, but yeah. Hmm.
You heard less. Well, you would know. Okay. Let's say it's under 10,000. And I think they've shut down the factory now.
Hmm.
What
Yes, that's the point.
what you should
So
have done is, sorry?
we are running a bit short of time, and I know
Okay.
you're also
Well,
in a hurry to go somewhere.
no.
Let
I'll
me
just
sort
say
of,
one thing on
sure,
the
yeah.
Harley Davidson. What you should have done is, because it wouldn't have impacted India's tax base, you should have said, look, Trump is my dear friend. For him, I'm going to take the tax from 100% to 15%. And Trump would have gone around America bragging, my friend Modi did this because I'm such a good salesman. Well, India did what it does well, Banyagiri. Oh, we'll make 100%, 50%. Do you think Americans are impressed by a 50% tariff? No. Anyway, since we're running out of time, please,
Yes,
last
I just,
comment.
I have a last question that I wanted to sort of run by you. Or let me put it in perhaps two small questions, perhaps, if I could look at it. Among the friction points that people here seem to be talking about, one, of course, is tariffs. The second one is climate change, because
Yeah,
Trump is obviously. So, the thing here is that we believe that we can agree to disagree on these two issues. I don't know how that's going to work, but apparently that's the thinking here.
right.
The third one is, of course, that Khalistani thing about the Qanun, which is now in a, I think it's in the legal process in New York where there's a thing. Um, is that something that is likely to change, or is that now that it's with the Justice Department, it's no longer within Trump's sort of?
Remember, we still have 2 months of the Biden administration.
Mhm.
And who knows what happens? Because now he's a serious lame duck president. He has nothing to lose. I have no idea which way he's going to go on this. Okay.
Mhm.
Second thing is, remember that in America, I can go to the Circuit Court of Appeals, I can go to a local court, I can file a case against a foreign government. The survivors, or not the survivors, the victims' families from 9/11 have repeatedly gone to court and got injunctions against Saudi Arabia, even though the American government, the world famous State Department, have no interest in doing that because they are beholden to the Saudis and Saudi oil.
Right.
But these are people going to a judge in New York and saying, give us an injunction against the Saudis. So I think you're absolutely right. The Justice Department will do what the Justice Department does. The US court system will do what the US court system does. And he can't really go against the US court system on something like Panoon. This is not, he can go on something like I don't want India to be labeled as a cheater in the WTO or something. That is a big
Hmm.
issue. Balloon is a small issue. It's played up in India. And in India, the media really needs to start working a bit more carefully. This whole thing about Australia Today, I
That's
finally
right.
found out what Australia Today is. It is an Indian diaspora newspaper in
I know.
Australia.
I know. Not
Okay.
many people know that.
No, they're going on like it's the Australian or the Sydney Morning Herald or the
Hmm.
Age, which are mainstream newspapers. Okay.
Yeah.
The Murdochs own those papers.
Hmm.
Australia Today is, and I know this will make you happy, an very inferior version of India Abroad, which you worked with,
Yes.
which was the premier newspaper of the Indian diaspora. Okay. Everybody
But that's it.
used, but that's it.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so the Canadians went for low hanging fruit. And what is an Indian diaspora newspaper in Australia going to do against the Canadian government? And it's not free speech. They annoyed the Canadians slapped them down. Okay? Uh, at the same time, and all your viewers should know this, the Canadians are talking very seriously to the Australians on improving defense relations.
Hmm.
So I doubt very much that the Australian Prime Minister, Mr. Albanese, is sitting there going, the Indian diaspora newspaper, Australia Today, which I hadn't heard of till 10 minutes ago, has been shut
Right.
out of Canada. So guess what? I'm not going to have a defense pact with Canada. Grow up.
Yeah.
Grow up.
No,
The,
it's not that. But the basic thing here seems to be that it is hypocritical for Canada to sort of do this when they're talking about freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff. That's the line that I'm hearing here.
okay, I'll just say this. When have Western news media outlets really pushed freedom of speech? The New York Times and the Washington Post lied and lied to their teeth about the
True.
Iraq war. And then, as you and I both know, went on the editorial pages and said, we apologize for our perfidy or our chicanery. Choose the word you like. I just like to say incompetence, stupidity, and basically venality, which is why I don't read either newspaper now. And you look at the way they talk on Gaza, you look at the way they talk on anything. They give you what the Washington elite wants to hear. Why would the Canadians be any different? Are the British newspapers any different? The Guardian possibly. Is Le Monde any different? So let's stop talking about the Western media as this wonderful free press. Look at the way they talk about non-Western countries. And you and I know this pretty well. It's always this kind of poverty pornography. It's always the scandal. It's always every bad thing that you can come up with. Why should we take them seriously? There are some very good media outlets which are not these ones on YouTube, Telegram, TikTok, so on, which give you the news which is far better. So who cares about what the Canadian government did? Oh, let me rephrase that. Why are you surprised that the Canadian government did that to Australia Today? And it's such a deceptive name. India Abroad tells you
Yes.
where, right, there's truth in advertising there. Australia Today, I swear I thought it was a new media outlet for the
I thought so too
Australians.
until I checked, and then I realized that it's you know,
So,
so.
long story short, don't take it seriously. It makes people happy. Arnab Goswami can sit and scream about it for half an hour on his TV show.
True.
And I'm happy. And he can bring the editor of Australia Today on, and all that is there. But in at a serious level, the Canadians are never going to give up on the Australians. And the Australians love the Canadians. I've written an article which I said the problem for countries like India is the Western nations have a one line, go back to Orwell, approach to foreign policy. White people who drink beer. So if you are the United States, you'll always be pally with Canada or Australia because they're white and you can drink beer with them. You can't drink beer with the Indian guy and he's not white. So once you admit to this, you know how to deal with them. And I'll end by saying this, Ramananda. Figure out what you want and figure out what you can give Trump and stop engaging in this kind of thing. We know how to deal with him because you didn't deal with him well the first time around. Otherwise, he
Mhm.
would have shown up being Trump, and Trump likes parades. So Republic Day would have been a wonderful thing for him. He would have said, I'll come, but you need to have 200 tanks. He likes tanks. Did he show up after your foreign service said, oh, we sent the invitation and he accepted? Or the other way
Right.
around, he accepted and we sent the invitation.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure what's going on. I do think, though, that America needs India because we need nurses, we need school teachers. I have no idea what will come next. And Indians need to think. My next book is on this. It's on how India should be looking at the United States. Indians need to understand there are 50 states in America which have a foreign policy. So work with the 50 states. Washington doesn't care for you, Harvard doesn't care for you.
On that note, I'm afraid we'll have to, close this one. I look forward to seeing you again when you're back in India in January. We'll have a longer
Absolutely.
discussion on this.
Yeah.
I'm sure things will have, heated up. Hopefully, I mean, by then, a lot. Thank you
Yeah,
so very much. It's a delight to have you with us as always. And like I said, look forward to having you again with us.
absolutely. It's great fun to do this, quite frankly. Thank you again,
Me too.
Ramananda.
Right. That was the one and only Professor Amit Gupta talking to us about what Trump means for, well, India, maybe the region, as well as India's sort of, policy vis-a-vis the Trump and how we may just be mistaken in our assumption that we know how to deal with the new American president. I do hope you enjoyed this particular edition of The Gist. Till we meet again, this is Ramananda Sengupta signing out.